Hello, welcome to albertohartley.com. Listen, today I am kind of shifting gears a little bit. This is a free post on the website, but it's also going to be posted on some other places because I have embarked on a new hobby of mine, which I'm coaching girls lacrosse. Yes, I know it sounds weird and funny looking at me. I don't look like I play lacrosse. I have never played lacrosse. I took it up a couple years ago when my daughter started playing, and I have somehow got myself into coaching a high school team, which is challenging. So but one of the things I've learned and the lesson I've learned is the power of communication between men and women, or in my case, because I'm the only man there at times, one man and lots of women. And the girls that I'm coaching are between the ages of 15, 16, 17, and 18, from a variety of backgrounds and educational levels. And I think that, and I also have 3 women in my house. I have 2 daughters and my wife, plus my dogs are also female. So I have to work really hard at probably communicating. So what I want to talk to you about today is how when we communicate with men, there's a couple things I want you to avoid, a couple things I want you to focus on. Number one, try not to be condescending. There's nothing worse than speaking to women in a condescending tone. I don't care what their ages are. Let's just try to remember it's the 21st century and women can pretty much do anything man can do. And men can't do everything women can do. So we need to, number one, don't be condescending. Here's what I mean by that. Sometimes we come off as being the knowledge holders and that everybody else needs to understand how things are done in our world. Well, first of all, that's a really archaic thought process. It doesn't work. Number two, acknowledge that things are different for women than it is for men. You know, one of the things I think is the most difficult is to be a 13-year-old girl in our culture where they have so many demands on them. And I think it's really bad for men and fathers especially to not communicate to them properly about accepting them for who they are and what they are instead of putting consistent demands upon them at every turn, right? Nobody wants to feel like that they can't meet an expectation. So a lot of times men approach girls and women as it's a sports project for some reason. Like, well, we're going to set out the goal and we're going to fight. That works in some context, but a lot of the times, the basis of a good communication I have found between my players and my daughters is they have to trust me that no matter what happens, I will accept them. What I mean by that, in other words, is that their level of trust with me is not contingent upon their performance at an event, or their performance at their school, or their performance at their job. Because that sort of relationship based on how well I did at the last task does not work for good communication. Because it doesn't build trust between the player, the daughter, the wife, and you. It just doesn't. Sometimes men like to play this sort of idea where we're going to set out the goal and we're all going to trudge it in together like troops. And I find that to be very ineffective. Okay. Lastly, make sure you explain to them where you're coming from and explain to them how you feel about a certain situation. That's a missing aspect. And a lot of my clients, number one, who have conflicts with women, number two, a lot of my clients who have difficulties with their daughters, is that they never can properly explain why they're taking a certain position. Some of them just don't feel like they have to explain it to them. Others can't articulate it well enough. And the last group, they've never thought about their own situation long enough and their own emotions to be able to give an articulate answer to any type of contest to it. Well, that's a dominating position. It's sort of like, well, just do it because I said so. Well, you know, I make money, so therefore you have to follow me. Well, you know, that doesn't build a relationship with anybody. So one of the things that's difficult when you're talking to players or any type of female, even in an office environment, is that they want you to explain where you're coming from. And I know that sounds simple, but it's really difficult for a lot of people, especially who are men, who've never had to do that before. Because a lot of times in sports, your performance drives the lack of communication. If you perform at something, you don't have to talk about it. If you do this really well, you don't have to explain yourself to somebody. But that doesn't work for most women. That doesn't work for most girls. And it definitely doesn't work for most daughters that I've met. And so the really effective level of communication is when you have for lack of a better term, submitting to the communication that's required between both of you. And what I mean by that is you say to that person, look, I'm going to trust you enough to communicate how I'm feeling about a circumstance whether this is stressing me out because I'm afraid of something that might happen to you, or I'm afraid of the consequences of this, or I'm fearful of something like this. Most men have difficulty explaining that to their wives and their daughters, and even to their players or their colleagues, because it makes them look weak. You can do that without sounding weak, because they already sense that sense of fear from you anyway. So in order to really improve the level of communication, I'm not talking about, getting on a cardigan sweater and drinking some tea at Oprah's book club. That's not what I'm talking about. But what I am talking about is that if something comes up, there's conflict, you have to explain what I consider to be a holistic approach, or a 360-degree approach. And here's what I explain to my buddies or my clients who I'm coaching in this regard. There's 4 parts to that. Number 1, you have to explain to them what your concern is. Number 2, you have to explain to them how you feel about that concern. Number 3, you have to tell them and explain to them so that they understand the consequence that you are anticipating because of that particular action. And then 4th, you have to explain 2 things. The 4th part is you have to explain what your solution to that situation is, and then you have to solicit their solution from that situation. You have to listen to that solution to that situation. If it's viable, basically assimilate that into your solution and make that work. So that way you're enrolling that person or enrolling that player in the solution as a whole. Once you do that, you're building a level of trust that is extremely significant, and it will also help to build that communication further down the line. So this is just some thoughts on communication. I'd love to get some feedback from you. If I'm off base, if you're reading this, you're like, this dude's clueless, let me know. It would be very helpful for the development of some of the website stuff I'm doing. Thanks a lot, and thanks for visiting AdmiralHartley.com.